I am here because, and I said this to my group, that I was lucky enough to be navigated around the educational landmines that plagued my sister and my cousins and my brother. And like many of you, I was fortunate enough to be in some type of tracked system that got us to a place of education. And my goal in life is to ensure that we remove all those landmines and all those barriers. Those landmines are poor instruction, horrible curriculum, misaligned funding, people who attempt to support our students by making profits from them. And so that is my work. And I think about Mr. Fitzpatrick, who was a teacher in my high school, who was the first individual who actually came into our home as a teacher and was not afraid. And that was very powerful for us because no one came to our home where I grew up. It was a place that I often tried to avoid. So that was an powerful impact for me. So I'm here because I think that I'm here to talk about the intersection between the higher ed world and the K-12, PK-12 world, and how we have wrapped our arms around this school system to create opportunities for our students. Our students these are demographics, you read them for yourself. It was a school that when we first entered 4 years ago, had a population on the records of about 1,500 kids. We found out after the first year that nearly 350 to 400 never attended over the course of 2 years. The reason that was done is because the more kids on the rolls, the more funding you get. And so it was a numbers game. We also discovered, this is a 612 school, we also discovered that there were a number of kids in 8th grade who were held back. Because if you drop out in New York State before you enter the 9th grade, you don't become part of the cohort, and therefore you're not counted within their graduation numbers. So if you hold enough kids back, they don't get to 9th grade, and they get to 16 or 17 and drop out, they become ghost kids. And so these are the realities that we faced in our school district. And prior to taking on this role, I was the chief of schools for this district where I oversaw about 26 schools, or a third of their population. This is some more demographics. And I hate sharing this because it's almost as if you create some type of street credibility by saying we have 90% kids with free and reduced lunch and 19% ELL. And I hate showing that, but it's a question that we often get asked. And of those 350 kids who dropped out, the vast majority of those kids were students with disabilities and kids who were ELL. So we had a systemic issue in which we were pushing kids out. We were creating a push-out factory based on some really misinformed practices within that setting. And so as the superintendent of this project and its researcher, we had an opportunity to do some very unique things with changing the master schedule, adjusting and adopting curriculum, working with education partners like HMH and Unbound Ed, and doing a ton of work around getting and creating schools that were of students and not for students. And I say that intentionally. The of in that statement is that it had to represent the authentic voice of our children. And so when we had a year to plan for this school, we really had to go to our students themselves and say, what is it that you want in a school environment? And then it's our job as adults to create a system that supports that. Prior to this, every system I had been in with all the right intentions was a system created for students. We created what we thought was best for them, and they ignored their true, authentic self. And so this came through a series of focus groups and interviews and talking to the kids and their parents and community members and community leaders around what it takes. And so since I am an obedient student, I did do the pre-reading, so I earned my breakfast this morning. And one of the sentences in there actually reminded me of this picture here. It says, design thinking is an essential tool for simplifying and humanizing. And I circled that 10 times on my paper, humanizing. It can't be extra. It needs to be a core competence. And I think when you create schools of students, it's the humanistic standpoint that you're coming from, right? It's the humanity that kids matter in the design of how they learn. And we heard that this morning with AI. We heard that just now with Dr. Ball, and I'm sure we'll continue to have that conversation about school systems that put students at the core or at the middle. A lot of our work at East is really rooted in this concept of distributed leadership, in which we have to provide professional development opportunities that ensure that everyone owns the success and failures of the organization equally. Often as a superintendent, we own all the failures and none of the success, right? And that's how we lose our jobs every 3 or 4 years. So I say, if I'm gonna go, I'm gonna be the last to go. We're all gonna go together. so you can imagine, right? That's right. So that's right. That's right. So it is no longer about this single heroic figure, this visionary, but really about establishing the collective we, both internally and externally in the system. And so we thought about how do we honor students authentically. We started by looking at support systems like restorative practices. And not that restorative practice itself in isolation solved anything, but thinking about how do we restore relationships between and among students, between students and staff, and what was really critical is between staff themselves. Because there were a lot of teachers who had experienced vicarious trauma by watching their colleagues hurt our babies year after year after year and not having a voice to change it, or felt they didn't have an authentic voice to change it. And so we had to make sure that we created a system that honored that desire and that need to change relationships. We use a family group structure. Every 30 minutes, every day, our students and staff meet at a time in which we circle up. We focus on political issues, social issues, economic issues, whatever the kids bring to it, and whatever the adults bring to it, it becomes an opportunity to build and bridge relationships. And that's how we find out about students who are missing. We find out about students who are being sexually exploited. Kids will tell in that safe environment. That's how we find out about teachers who are in pain. You know, a teacher who's going through cancer treatment, it's hard for them to teach, but they can't take the time off because they don't have the sick days available. And the students wrap their arms around them. We talk about adequate support staff. These are the individuals we heard earlier with ABA certified, psychologists, social workers are supporting our students in really meaningful ways and looking at their ACEs scores and creating systems in which these children are allowed to heal, not just in school, but connecting them to resources outside in the community. That we had to find the right people. And I'll tell you, this is not a pure science. In every school, you have some of the wrong people. The idea is to help them think about their own thinking, their metacognition, about what's causing the disconnect between them and the students that they serve, and then helping them process through it. For us to just assume that yelling at teachers and telling them that you need anti-racist education or abolitionist education is going to fix how they actually function, it doesn't help. So we have to build systems to help them get through that in their own authentic way, and allowing them to take risks in that process. One of our mantras in our school is to celebrate your incompetence daily. We say that all the time. And so my mission to them is to ensure that they are intentionally and purposely making mistakes and modeling that mistake making to their students so they can become better educators and better people. And the last, but certainly not least, is a focus on community. And that is important. Because again, if the idea of nothing for us without us holds true at East, that we must do things with the community in that context. And so we did some stuff, and from a curricular standpoint, we created a really comprehensive model. I'm not going to go through now, but this will be available for you all. We're now in year 4. We're moving into year 5, and you can see the intentionality of our work, focusing on defining a clear mission and vision, and then moving it through the system. So what we do is intentional and embedded. It's not an add-on. So getting back to design thinking, that it's humanistic and it's simplifying the work that we're doing, giving people the idea and the opportunity to predict their stress. I told them year 3 was going to be the hardest year, because that means I was getting in your classrooms. And I know you didn't. I want to inspect what I expect. But year 5 is about revision and self-reflection. We also wanted to have a model that focused on the quality community engagement. And so our family and community engagement ecology is what we created, puts face at the middle, and it becomes the intersection for where our core beliefs are. We give respect for time, because time is often something that we rush through. And then we look at the external issues that might impact our school. And together we created a comprehensive plan to really address, again, the intersection between parents and families, schools, and community. And what we see as results, because I think this is what we often talk about, like what happens in these situations where kids are in underserved, undertaught, credentialed communities, is that we said when we start to see the yellow is the dropout line and the purple is the graduation rate, you can see exactly when we started in the first year, very little movement. That was that 19% number that we had to by August got to, and you'll see where we are now if you look at. Yeah, this is a cohort. So when kids enter the cohort, freshman year is the year they begin. So this is the year before we came. In one school. So this is freshman, sophomore, and then those juniors. But some kids started as sophomores who graduated as seniors, as you can tell. So this past school year was the first year we had kids enter in 9th grade and move all the way through the system. And then we also, as a middle school, so we have kids who will be there for 6 years and 7 years over time. And you'll see the dropout rates there and some of that work. I also want to show you that the graduation rates in terms of 4-, 5-, and 6-year rates. And what I like about this chart is kids are staying through and beyond their 4th year. And they're not dropping out as much as they did before. But last June, our graduation rate was 51%, 51.7, and then this past June, this recent June, it was 65. And so you can see the trajectory heading in the right direction, and by August, we should be near 70%. and I want that number in June to be 70 and 75 and 80 and going. And so there's a direct correlation between the services and systems that we put in place through curriculum and social emotional support and teacher and leader development and the outcomes of our youth. And that is my talk. I rushed through it because I know we're a little behind time, but I wanted to make sure I hit some of those key points. All right?